It is time. 1 second. All right. Oh. Welcome, everybody, to another exciting episode of the Crowdsourced Politics News Roundup. I am your host and moderator, Cypher here. And if this is the first time you've joined the News Roundup, this is the Crowdsourced Politics News Roundup. We are a funky little... We're a podcast born out of a funky little debate community from Facebook, and we just started a podcast about 2 years ago. We do the news roundup from about 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to about 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, covering the news that was with the kind of analysis only the crowd can provide. Today, I am joined by Drummer. Drummer, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing pretty well.
Universal Discourse should be joining us. She said that she'd be here, but she is running a tad late. So, Drummer, please go ahead and tell our audience a little about yourself.
Sure. Well, hello. I'm Drummer, or Alex, whichever you prefer. I have a reasonably small YouTube channel where I talk about current events, politics. Sometimes I get into more like pop culture stuff, but focus on mostly reading articles and just being well informed in general, because at the end of the day, I don't really care if you agree with me, but I do care that you're well informed. So there you go.
It is great to have you on the program again. I believe you were on the program 2 weeks ago, and it was a great time.
Yeah.
So, I'm glad that you were able to join us. For people to not know me, Cypher, been podcasting, streaming for about 2 years. Kind of fall in the kind of liberal to liberal left realm of things, but I try to keep things as objective as I possibly can. But sometimes facts are facts, and you just got to tell people what's up. So we are going to go ahead and get started. So at the top of the news here, we again welcome everybody. Thank you again so much for joining us. If you haven't heard, we do another podcast called Cipher State. Cipher State is a foreign affairs and foreign policy focused podcast that we do once a month on the third Sunday of every month, starting at about 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and will be released to podcast wherever you get your podcast at on the fourth Monday of every month. This past episode was about the German elections. The episode was called German Traffic Lights, covering what the German elections mean for the EU and the world as a whole. So if you want to see that, you can catch that wherever you get your podcast here coming Monday or on YouTube. Oh, Universal Discourse has joined us. Hey, Eugene, how are you doing?
I'm okay. How are you?
Good. Glad that you could join us. Since you just joined us, why don't you let the audience know a little bit about yourself, and then we'll get started.
Okay. I'm Universal Discourse on Twitch. I'm streaming about 4 nights a week now, and I'm a regular here with Crowdsourced Politics, which I've supported since the beginning. And I have taken another job, and I deliberately asked for Thursdays off just so I could come. So
Aww.
I'm a fan.
That means so much to us. You don't know how much that means. I really appreciate it.
My manager hates you, but I don't care. They hate you guys. I was like,
well,
politics. What you gonna do?
Right. All right. Let's go ahead and get started with national politics and the reconciliation bill. Starting with an update on the budget bill that would expand the social safety net, it looks like the number is dropping from $3.5 trillion to somewhere around $1.9 to $2.1 trillion over the next 10 years. If you've been paying attention to this show, you know that I have been saying personally that we will see anywhere between $2 and $2.5 trillion. Despite talks circulating around 1.9 to 2.1, I still believe it will be 2 to 2.5 and not anywhere near that 1.9 number. After a week of high-level talks with President Biden, the intensive negotiations among congressional Democrats talks with President Biden and intensive negotiations with congressional Democrats, it appears that the compromise has begun to form, but the resulting cuts are expected to be very deep. You'll remember that the major holdup of the passage of the bill have been Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia and Kyrsten Sinema of Arizona. Manchin has been public about his adamant opposition to the price tag of the bill, and it looks like the pressure has worked. Senate Democrats are striving to come to an agreement by the end of this week. Among the program proposals affected are no tuition, 2-year public community colleges is expected to be active. The child tax credit will be renewed for only a year with permanent refundability and will likely face a means test. Proposed funding to provide home care services for seniors and the disabled will be reduced, and the family leave plan may fall from 12 weeks to just 4. $300 billion in investments to combat climate change remains a top priority. So, we're going to be talking about this until the cows come home, basically. So, that's a little bit of Texas there for you. What are we thinking? What is this going to still be a good bill with the cuts that have just been mentioned, or do you believe that it's going to be kind of crap now and there needs to be better? Who would like to go first? You see Universal Discourse nodding her head. Why don't you go ahead and go first?
Well, I mean, I came from Arizona, so Sinema was. I knew she would do that. We all did. So, but yeah, all the critical needs, for people that everybody was pushing for, and support your family, support education, general welfare, and future forward thinking. We make these changes now for a better generation. Yeah, they're all gonna go. So I think it's crap, and I think they're just gonna absolutely corrode the opponents of it, until it's pointless, which is I don't know, one of the worst cases of just redlining everything. So I think it's just crap, and I mean it's not like you can just redo it in 6 months,
Right.
So and I think they're just they've stopped doing their job up there. They've stopped representing the people, and they're full on power struggle to get that whole last 4 years of whatever in power. So they're just gonna stonewall every single thing. I think it's absolute crap. Done.
Drummer, what about you? What are you thinking of these deep cuts that are going?
Yeah, I mean, they're not fun. Like, obviously, we don't want to see it if you're hoping for $3.5 trillion and you have to settle for, seems like worst case scenario 1.9. Like, obviously, we're not looking forward to that. I think Universal Discourse was right when she said, like, talking about stonewalling, and I think that's something we see in American politics a lot of times when it seems to be when like Republicans get into power, Democrats are always ready to compromise, trying to just get anything passed they possibly can. And then when it's the other way around, it seems to be that Republicans will just abuse whatever thing they can, whether it be the filibuster or whatever they possibly can do just to stall and delay. And then they get to turn around and say, oh my God, look, Democrats have been in for 4 years and they've done nothing. And it's like, well, yeah, they've done nothing because you just sat there and stalled for 4 years, But the one, I guess my one to be hopeful is if we, if some of these things do go through, that it ends up being sort of like a bouncing off point to then expand them later. I feel most times like if you give somebody something, say like child tax credits, whatever, they get used to it and they start enjoying it and they say, okay, this just becomes a part of life. And then down the road, next year, whatever, you can say, hey, this was great. Let's expand that and continue it. And then you have people who've already experienced it and you get a lot more support behind it. More politicians can see that it's a politically viable position to have, that their people are liking it and it's very popular. And then hopefully you can expand it from there, kind of like with what we hoped would happen with minimum wage, right? You get it to increase and then it's just easier to try and increase it each time after that.
No, for sure. I think that's a very good point about the child tax credit. I personally would like to see it expanded and made permanent. However, I am also personally not against, means testing by any sense of the imagination. I don't feel as though, I mean, it might come off as petty, but I don't feel as though that people who are very well off necessarily need the assistance. And if we care, and if we care about budget deficits, being able to fund things without necessarily raising taxes too much or going too much into debt, we don't want to see that these programs encompass people that may not help. My concern, though, is with the axing of the 2-year free community college. I thought that was a great plan, a great part of the plan, and I thought it's very much needed, especially because of the way that way things are structured. We do need people, in order to get into the middle class, pretty much need to have some sort of secondary education, whether that is technical school or something like that, or college. And the amount of money that a person makes when they go from like, a poor kid like me to somebody that's a college graduate is life transforming. It's absolutely life transforming. And I think that making that free to everybody, regardless of income, shows how much we recognize that is the case and how much we actually value it as a society. So I'm disappointed to see that, and I hope that it actually doesn't get. But what are the things in this that you think of your guys' thoughts about that? Like, what are the things in this bill that you don't want to see get cut, that might be getting cut?
The community college, to cut that, I mean, wow, it's foolish. That's seriously foolish. You don't invest in education, you don't advance as a nation. And everybody knows that, Putting an extra financial burden on young people whose families may already be lower income, or for whatever reason, they don't have the means, Okay, they don't, those kids don't get to become contributors as adults. I mean, they skip that whole process. I know what I thought was interesting was this, the Kroger chains. I think they're union. And what they did is they went to their union, and their union now offers free 4-year degrees.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I didn't know that.
And they hire as young as 15.
That I did know. I did know that they hire.
So there's one national chain that stepped up in a predictive way, because they have to compete with, Amazon, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
So that was the move they made. There's a lot of corporations actually that are union, who have opportunities like that. So, I mean, there may be a safety net there for some people, but then you've got your kid going to work and going to college, at the same time. So, but able to stay at home. But cutting anything toward education is it's not going to cause a disaster. It's just like what do you call that? A death knell.
Mm-hmm.
The standards of education being what they are already. From 2006, it's just been absolute boom.
Oh yeah.
Down.
I agree.
The other thing was they were talking about the forgiving the student loans debt that Bush's policies caused. So I want to see that one back on for sure.
That one was one of the first ones that got cut. That's why it's not even mentioned now.
Dropping the child tax credit is another absolute disaster. The opponents, they seem to want the peasantry back. Like, they seem to want people to be as destitute and incapable of advancement as possible. And they know it. They know that's what it's going to cost. It's a big, wide pool of growing poverty. That's just what it's going to result in. Because poverty isn't an utter lack of opportunity. And they're taking away all of it. So.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that education in general is a super important thing to keep in. Like, I know it's unfortunate because it was I feel like a pretty large part of Biden's campaign platform was talking about just the whole free education, the 2-year college thing, debt forgiveness, all this stuff, and that was like a big deal for a lot of people that I know. And then to just kind of like let it go so quickly is definitely rather disappointing in the grand scheme of things. But I do like to see that investments for curbing climate change are still on there. That's at least like a diamond in the rough, if you will, of things that are going on, because I think that's something that we've tried to do a little, like, I don't want to say too much, but we've definitely I think that the American people do well with incremental change. So I think when it comes to like climate change, like you have to say, okay, well, what's the biggest thing we can tackle, and then tackle that and say, hey, see, this works. It doesn't really change your life that much. Okay, let's move on to the next thing, So I do at least like they're still in talks for keeping that in there.
Yeah, as of now, but I mean, you want to curb climate change, so this is going to be a generational endeavor. I mean, so I say again, you're going to need very well-educated, competent, and dedicated people, which the young people are. There's all the Zoomers. Give them the keys; they're going to change everything. But you delimit them. What's that going to look like, right? 5 guys with a wet vac going here. It's better. It's better now. Look, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, okay. So nothing can be done without competent people doing it. So sometimes when they cut something out of this budget, what happens is they've already made the back deal with a sort of a program directors, who step in and do something with that item that got chopped. So I don't think they're just going, oh, okay, we'll throw that out. Like, that's usually not how it works. So I'm curious to see what programs spring up as a result of the cuts.
Oh, so you're saying like an ulterior motive, like that there's something else that they want to get funded, and their compromise was, look, get rid of this child tax credit because we really got to do this other thing.
If Biden obviously knows how to work with the Department of Labor, okay, which is generally the department that handles all that whole total labor budget, all right? They do massive projections, okay? So if he's working with them well and working with his advisors well on that, there's sort of a program and then another option, and then it's like a pyramid of plan Bs, all right? And so you hope that it gets into the budget, and if he doesn't, you have a backup if he's listening to his advisors. And I don't know if he is or not. We're not privy to that. That's what I'm hoping. So what is cut, you're going to see a lot of programs spring up that are addressing those needs, and they're going to be diverse programs with different types of funding. A lot of it is crowdsourced. There are some options.
Speaking of what kind of programs may be cut or what things are being looked at, according to the Washington Post, the different Democratic factions are prepared to compromise on what's included in the spending bill. As they puzzle over ways to shrink the bill, some Democrats have pushed to include fewer programs, but lawmakers said many of the proposals contained in Mr. Biden's original plan appeared likely to remain in some form, with shortened durations or limited applicability. Representative Parliament Jayapal has said that, quote, "It's not the numbers we want. We have consistently tried to make it as high as possible. The idea that we can do these programs, multitude of programs, actually get them going so that they deliver immediate transformational benefits to people is what we're focused on." With additional cuts that are things in this bill, is one of them being the idea of a carbon tax, which Joe Manchin and John Tester have both opposed. Manchin specifically having panned the clean energy program in an article, an op-ed himself. Then there's also the discussions to repurpose that $150 billion, Discord was saying, that had been earmarked in the effort to spur electric utilities to more rapidly reduce emissions, to instead fund other efforts to fight climate change. This includes things like additional tax credits for solar and nuclear power and capturing carbon emissions from fossil-fueled power plants. They also include grants and loans to incentivize emissions reductions in steel, concrete. Quote, "We're going with tax incentives. We're going to incentivize people basically to move forward on technology that we have. Manchin had said on Tuesday, we're going to make the best that we have in technology, use it for the betterment of. So slower than what progressives want, maybe a little quicker than what Manchin want, but there's been talk about Manchin basically owning some. I don't know how true this is, but I've seen things. People are saying that Manchin has owned some coal plants and is very wedded to the coal industry in West Virginia, which I know the latter part being 100% true. That's a lot of donors, West Virginia, a lot of coal miners, etc. So do you think, like, to me, this isn't enough at all, but it is better than nothing, and people are more likely to support incentives than they are to support they're more likely to support carrots than sticks, for lack of a better. So what about y'all?
Well, I mean, I'm right there with you. Obviously, like, we want to see a lot of, reducing carbon emissions and all sorts of other things we can do. But I think that you're right when you say that, like, yeah, we need to have it more, but we're getting there and we're starting. I think when it comes to coal miners specifically, like, there's always this like doomer narrative that comes around with stuff like that, like, oh, there's gonna, that like overnight we're gonna erase coal and every coal miner is gonna be out of work and in the bread lines, whatever. Like, this seems to be like the narrative that plays out whenever there's a new technology or something that's gonna like change the way that certain jobs function or whatever. Like, there's always seems to be the mentality that people have of like, oh, that means tomorrow I'm gonna be out of work. Every penny I've ever had is gonna be gone. And it's really not gonna be like that. It's gonna be a much slower, much more gradual process. But like, at some point we have to just pick a starting point and say we gotta start here. And if you can, I am definitely a believer in that. If you show somebody that something is working, it's very easy to convince them to do it more. So if you start with a few of these things and say, hey, look, coal miners still have jobs. There are still, these people aren't just immediately destitute. That people will be a lot more warm to that idea, and that over time you can start getting more and more things done. And I feel like it'll be exponential. Like, once you start seeing the first few policies start working, maybe these tax incentives are really great, and it's like stupid to not switch to solar because the tax incentives are just so astronomical. Like, yeah, I think after a while, then you're just going to see everyone start to pick it up.
No, for sure. Universal discourse. Do you think that? I mean, what's your take on this particular idea of incentivizing cleaner energy and carbon capture rather than more sticks like carbon capture? You're muted.
Oh, yeah. I mean, incentives. Yeah, definitely. Incentivizing definitely gets more people on board if the incentive makes sense to them. If it actually benefits them. If it's feasible, for them, and they can understand it. Solar panels sometimes can be so complicated when you try to get them put in, and the deal you have to make with the electric company and the I mean, there's a lot of paperwork in it. Plus constructing a solar roof. I mean, there's things you have to do. There's inspections. Blah, 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 blah. Most of the time, by the time you think you just have the guys come in and put it in, is 6 months down the road, and you still have.
That's true.
Right. So incentivizing it, for instance, would be to stop all that nonsense and make it a simple thing. You definitely have to have a reinforced roof, though. What are you going to do about that? Like, for instance, if it's not at the right slope and it's not reinforced, you don't have solar panels. You're not getting them. So things like that have to be taken into consideration. Definitely incentivizing any green energy initiative. It's going to make a difference, but the reality is, climate change is not actually a policy. It's an event. So yeah, you want to incentivize, but you need to focus on slowing it down, because it's already going toward greenhouse gases. You don't have a whole lot of time to wait to file your taxes. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you basically do everything that can be done and use all there is to use. Is the tactic if they actually want to do something about this. So for sure, but it's logistically, it's extremely difficult. So I don't know. Sometimes I think they should just get the National Guard, the Air National Guard, the CBs, and these people, civil engineers, get them in there and let them do what they do. You know, they have the budget for it, so something actually has to be done to help people.
To piggyback off of Universal Discourse point about the complications, I moved into my house on February of 2020, and I pretty much instantly got solar panels, but I didn't get the switch turned on until July. So it was like from the time I signed the contract to the time that the inspections and everything was done, didn't get turned on until March, and this is Texas. So the regulations and stuff on that aren't necessarily onerous. Now, I didn't have to do anything. I just signed the contract, and the city and the solar panel company I went through Momentum. They all took care of everything. You know, all I did was sign the paperwork and was there when they came out to do the inspections if they needed, for whatever reason, to give them access to the roof and all that stuff. But yeah, it still took a long time to get done. So it wasn't it wasn't something. It was a very simple process, but it took a long time.
Did you already have roofs at the right angle?
Yeah, it's a new build, so I believe we did. Like, they didn't have to do anything. So, my street goes north-south, so they put it on the east side of the house. So that was easier to do. But there's several houses in the neighborhood that did something similar. I think I have one of the bigger solar panel setups though, which is weird. But anyways, enough about that. I think we've talked about the infrastructure bill, or I'm sorry, the budget reconciliation bill. Enough about this. So let's go ahead and move on to the January 6th committee and contempt of Congress charges against Steve Bannon. House Democrats today on the issues of holding Stephen Bannon in contempt of Congress took the form of deflections and distractions from Republican speakers. Instead of addressing the question, most Republicans talked about Biden's IRS proposal instead of the questions holding Bannon accountable. For those who don't know, the IRS proposal here is the IRS having the ability to track any more than $600 transactions back and forth between banks, whether a person takes out $600 in cash or whatever, just putting up a flag. That's been nixed, so I don't know why they're talking about it. But anyways, that's what it is. Former President Donald Trump issued a statement today saying that the insurrection actually occurred on November 3rd because he won the election, and January 6th was a protest. The Democratic speakers during the debate tried to get their colleagues across the aisle to address the statement to no avail. A criminal contempt report was unanimously approved by the House Select Committee Tuesday night. It's a move that could send a message to other former Trump advisors that the committee has no patience for obstruction of its subpoenas. Reading a little bit further, according to CNN on Tuesday night, members of the committee blasted Bannon for refusing to cooperate with the panel's probe and said it is isolated in doing as other witnesses are working with the panel. Furthermore, Thompson and Cheney, both Republicans, said during the meeting that the panel believes Bannon has significant knowledge of the planning around the attack, and reiterated that they expect the Department of Justice to prosecute once the House formally votes on a criminal referral. Quote, based on the committee's investigation, it appears that Mr. Bannon had substantial advance knowledge of the plan for January 6th and likely had an important role in formulating those plans, Thompson said in opening remarks. The American people are entitled to Mr. Bannon's firsthand testimony about all these relevant facts, but Mr. Bannon is refusing to provide it. Oh, I'm sorry, Thompson is the Democratic chair. My bad. Not the Republican. Cheney also blasted Bannon for refusing to cooperate and reiterated the committee's view that his claim of executive privilege is not only invalid, but suggests that Trump was personally involved in the planning and execution of the attack. quote, Mr. Bannon and Mr. Trump's privilege argument appear to reveal one thing, however. They suggest that President Trump was personally involved in the planning execution of January 6th, and we will get to the bottom of that, Cheney had said. So, this is gearing up to be quite the shit show. But we've known about that ever since January 6th, essentially. So is this going to change anybody's minds? Are we going to learn anything more? Or is this going to be an effort in just getting it into the congressional record for, I guess, good keeping, history purposes? What are your thoughts? Drummer, why don't you go ahead and first?
Sure. Well, yeah, obviously, I mean, so if Steve Bannon himself had, say, a direct influence or direct hand or pushed people in a certain direction, then yeah, obviously, and if that's found through an investigation or testimony or whatever, then yeah, obviously he has to answer for that. And it's part of my opinion on it is like, okay, if he has nothing to hide, then why would he dodge? I mean, other than, I guess technically he has everything to gain from not testifying, right? Because then he gets to play the victim and say like, oh, look, they're trying to get him to testify, all this kind of stuff, whatever, and all that. So like he, I guess, sort of benefits from it. But like at the end of the day, regardless of your political leanings, like we should, as American people, we should know like, well, how did we end up in that position? Because like we all saw the footage from January 6th. There were quite a few people there with all sorts of motivations. And at the end of the day, it's like, well, how did all these people coordinate? Was somebody guiding them? Or did these people all were just randoms on the internet who decided like, hey, wouldn't it be funny if we all marched, on the Capitol building that day, right? Yeah, you should just, so I guess personally, right, he has nothing to lose by not testifying because he gets to play the victim. But at the same token, he can also testify, and like people who already like him, I don't think are going to change their opinion of him. Like, let's say hypothetically, he came out and said, "Yep, it was all me. Like, I planned the whole thing. I was the guy behind all of it." I don't think people that support him are going to think any less of him because they already support him, and people who already don't like him are just not going to like him more. So yeah, that's my 2 cents about it.
No, I think that's very fair. And in case it wasn't clear to the audience, they did vote unanimously to hold him in contempt, and the final vote of the House, the full House, was 229 to 202, with 9 Republicans voting in favor. House Select Committee Vice Chair Liz Cheney and Representative Eisinger, Nancy Mace, Fred Hampton, Peter Meyer, John Cato, Brian Fitzpatrick, Anthony Gonzalez, and Jamie Herrera Burlett. So those are the 9 Republicans who attempt. And his haters hate. Yeah, right. This is a good point coming from maybe it isn't me. Can his haters hate him anymore? Anyways, I don't think so. So that's actually a good point about this. Like Steve Bannon is pretty much like hated universally on the broad left spectrum of the politics, because I mean, let's be real, he's a scuzzbucket. I mean, he defrauded even his own supporters about the wall. Like, what is it? 200? He was involved in that $250 million scheme on GoFundMe. Like, how did it was on GoFundMe down. They sold bricks. Like, you got your name in a brick that was supposed to go into the wall. Like, it was all a sham. But yes, I don't think that his haters could hate him anymore, and so I'm not sure if that is going to happen. But I would say that I do believe holding him in contempt gives at least some justice as long as he testifies. And if he refuses to testify, then I don't know. But Universal Discourse, what about you?
Bannon has never been a victim. His own contempt for authority is legendary. He may appear kicking and screaming, but he feels no obligation to tell anybody anything. You can't make him buckle. He won't do it. He is, staunchly anti-government, if you want to put it that way. So here he is, an advisor to the president, right? He was one of the first individuals to approach Donald Trump about running for president back in 2006. So if he's not behind this, I'd be terribly surprised. But if you're expecting some sort of cooperative confession, all you're going to get is typical Bannon, which is like the man is made of bile. He's seething with contempt in and of himself. So to hold him in contempt it's almost ironic, you know? The most contemptuous person that you'll ever meet being held in contempt. Ha ha. He does not care. He will enjoy his year off. It will have no influence or effect on him. It'll just enrage him, maybe a little more. But if you understood what his actual network is, you know, you might be more concerned, because he's the preacher of the whole thing. And he always has been for decades.
No, it's very true. He's been making anti-democrat, anti-liberal propaganda since basically I was about to say since Seinfeld, but he wasn't. He was involved in Seinfeld as a producer and like investor, so that's where he got a lot of his money in. Actually, if you didn't know that, now you do. But ever since he got that money, he's been doing it. So at least since like 1998 or so, I think he did one of the first movies ever on Clinton. And one of the other things is, like, if it push comes to shove, he'll just abscond. He'll go to like Italy. He'll go to, I don't know, some South American country that's keen on what he's selling. I don't know. Maybe he'll try to go resurrect Fukushima and Pinochet. I don't know. But he'll end up doing something like that. And
did you see
just like, fuck off.
The movie Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?
Yeah.
You remember John Goodman's role? The giant?
Vaguely. Yeah.
The giant, and he was the snake oil salesman, and he brought him out to a tree, and then he pulled out the club, and okay, that's Bannon.
Yeah.
That's exactly how he actually is in real life. If you've ever had the misfortune of having to work with him or deal with him, universally hated. Oh my God.
I can see that.
No, he actually is that way. He is barely, when he has to sit, you know, in front of these folks, and he like, what do you say that where you're seething to the point where your teeth are cracking. He is barely holding himself together. His outrage, all right. And when you have to sit with him, then he turns around and everybody has to pay for it from the second he leaves the room for God knows how long.
Mm-hmm.
He just wants to burn everything away all the time. He's that volatile. Oh, you can hear him when he gets angry, bellowing across the holler. I mean, it's like, oh, here he goes again. Here he goes again. Just he's a volcano of ice, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, at the risk of getting canceled, I think I would actually want to talk to him.
Me too. I have actually talked to him, but that's why I'm telling you that. But I'm saying, okay, I would, as a journalist, Breitbart, for instance, was such a inveterate neo-Nazi platform, for instance. So I'm just like, and here's the good old boys, and the whole Dixiecrat thing it's him. I mean, he's it.
Yeah, fourth turning and all that bullshit too. But continuing on, because Trump can never be not the center of attention, even when he's the center of attention, has actually filed a civil lawsuit Monday against the special committee in an effort to prevent the release of records from his National Archives. Mr. Trump's lawsuit names the committee chair Benny Thompson, the entire committee, the National Archives, and David Ferrero, the director of the National Archives. The suit accuses the committee of sending an illegal, unfounded, and overbroad records request to the National Archivist, and says the records are protected by numerous legal privileges. Do you think this is going to go anywhere?
No.
This lawsuit,
I mean, it's a Trump lawsuit. It's probably going nowhere. Like, with most things he does, it's probably all for show.
It's got to be, because no self-respecting lawyer, you know, unless they were a like the kind of lawyer that's engaged in collections, which I suspect most of them are.
Hmm.
They don't even have a proper law background, and the language in all of his filings is, wow, are you ever throwing a Hail Mary? They literally just throw it to the wall to see if anything sticks.
Yeah. But I think that's more of like what we saw from Trump for 4 years was
Exactly.
he talks big, says he's going to do something, and everyone gives cheers and everything. Oh, everyone loves it, whatever. And then he goes and tries to do it, and it doesn't get done. And rather than like accepting any responsibility, it's always that like the infamous, oh, they don't want me to succeed. It's everyone's trying to stop me, but don't worry, like I'm here fighting for you every day. But and when really it's like if you look into stuff, it's like, yeah, this is kind of frivolous. Like this was never going anywhere. This was just to like appease the fans because they believed him, but like the more level-headed people who you were like, no, this is never going anywhere. There's no way. Like you said, like no lawyer worth their salt is going to pick that up.
It's that sorry, what's that called? SNL skit? The lunchroom? Do you remember?
Yeah.
When nobody would let him sit with him?
Oh.
Yeah. It's his whole life. It's actually, I think, rather cruel, but true. But that's how he is. It didn't happen because they don't like me.
Yeah, basically.
I was like, kindergarten must have sucked for you really bad. Oh, wow. Did you go?
He didn't get any love from his dad. We know that.
Oh, no. His father was a wicked man. His treatment of his son was what gave Donald Trump, initially quite a lot of sympathy because they were so hoping that they could get him away from this ogre.
Yep.
But the apple doesn't fall far from the tree because what Donald always wanted was power.
Sad but true.
Well, he got it.
Well, that's he raised a monster. His father raised a monster. His father was a monster who raised one.
Oh yeah, I mean it's KKK civil sympathies, Nazi sympathies, etc. So yeah, pretty big EOS. Speaking of power, though, I think we've covered the Bannon and Trump lawsuits pretty well. So let's get into voting rights. Senate Republicans used the filibuster to block the voting rights bill for the third time yesterday. All 50 Democrats voted for the bill, though Majority Leader Schumer changed his vote to no so that the bill could still be considered in the future. So this is one of those weird procedure things. If it's a dead 50-50 lock thing or whatever, then it can't be reconsidered. So if you vote no against your own bill, I don't know. It's something wonky in the Senate. So he voted yes and then switched no so that it could be reconsidered. According to New York Times, even as they thwarted once again by Republicans, Democrats began to shift tactics and tones. Rather than discussing the need to jettison the filibuster, which can sound like a wonky feud over procedure, they're trying to frame the right in grander terms, the inability of the contemporary Senate to function given the routine use of filibuster. After the vote, multiple Democrats said that there was a need to, quote, restore the Senate to a point where the filibusters were rare and majority votes were sufficient to advance important legislation. What we saw from Republicans today is how the Senate is supposed to work, Mr. Schumer said, is not how the Senate is supposed to work, Mr. Schumer said. This is supposed to be the world's greatest deliberative body where we debate, forge compromise, amend and pass legislation to help the American people. That is the legacy of this great chamber. The stalemate over the voting bill and other Democratic priorities is clearly frustrating Democrats and drawing more into a willingness to consider rules changes. Senator Angus King, independent of Maine, made clear this week that he was open to entertaining some revisions if that was what it would take to advance the voting bill. On Wednesday, Senator John Tester, Democrat of Montana, said he was also reconsidering his own reluctance to alter Senate rules. After Wednesday's vote, Democrats essentially abandoned the idea of winning over Republicans. Now they have to persuade a few of their own members that the need to adopt voting legislation outweighs the allegiance to Senate procedures, bringing us once again back to Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema. Is this going to go anywhere? Like, I'll start this one off. I am still, despite all this, hesitant to completely axe the filibuster, because I do believe that compromise is important, even if that means that I get less of what I want. I also don't want to see Republicans just run roughshod over everything that the Democrats have accomplished in the last 70 years. I don't want to see more chipaways, more advanced chipaways at things such as the Voting Rights Act, and things like that, and what have you. I also don't want to see Republicans just come in and say, "Oh, all that bills that you passed for 10-year funding of like infrastructure or what have you, yeah, we're just gonna get rid of all that. We're just gonna give tax cuts instead," and just ping pong back and forth, where you basically just have like 1 or 2 years of like a step forward and you take 3 or 4 steps back, and I just don't want to see that. That said, I personally would like to see some changes, and of those changes, there's 2 top ones. 1, reducing the threshold from 60 to 55. 2, also requiring that people take the floor to bust. Right now, you just file a motion and you bust the bill. If you have to stand the floor and grandstand, then people get to hear all the bullshit you have to pull out of your ass and can make their own judgments about it. And then it also focuses on who's actually gumming up the works to hold them accountable. That's where I'm at it. Universal discourse. You and I have talked about this quite extensively. What are your thoughts about this now?
Well, restore the Senate to functionality. Obviously, because they represent the general welfare. The filibustering, when it's abused, has to stop. So, restore it. It's, if their purpose is to, undermine and create, a dysfunctional system, which seems to be the case, do everything in your power to set it right. Because it is the kind of a paragon of democracy, of democratic discourse. So, you don't do it, you've lost your national identity, I guess. You basically lost your footing. So either America gets used to giving up the Pax title, downsizing the way England has, which is shortly going to vanish completely. Either give up the Pax title, right, or fix it. And when they're doing things like this, you go higher. You remind people of what all of that was for in the first place, So they're going to have to, they've obviously, let's just face it, half the freaking or more of the policymakers in the country are completely corrupt. What are you going to do? Negotiate that? Like the Haitian kidnappers? So you cry blood?
We will talk about that in a minute, sure. Drummer, what about you?
Sure. The filibuster I know is kind of contentious right now, but I wouldn't want, Democrats in the Senate to make some sort of knee-jerk reaction now and say, "Oh my God, we got to get rid of it," when they have to understand that the same process applies to them as well. That they could be doing the exact same thing when it's their turn, so to speak, when there is something that they don't want passed. So I wouldn't want them giving up something like that so quickly without potentially considering maybe we want to keep this around because maybe we can use it to our advantage later. But I do agree with you, Cypher, when you said that there should be some changes to it where people have to actually physically be there, not just file a motion. You actually, what was it? There was one. There's that one story where was a guy filibustered for 20 hours or something. It was something crazy. He just read from the phone book for after a while. He just kept going. If you want to do that, you're gonna have to show me something impressive. I'm gonna need to see you get up there with a Camelback and a bag of chips, and you're ready for the long haul. If you're gonna really be there. So then, that's what I think it should be. It should be something that you have to really make a concerted effort to do, and can't just file a motion and be "Oh yeah, we're just gonna obstruct from now to end of time." But I think again, it's another tactic just broadly that we've seen from Republicans a lot. Like, they're going to sit here and say, abuse the filibuster. And then Democrats are going to complain and say, hey, look, they're blocking this bill. And then the Republicans get to turn around and paint themselves as the victims and go, oh my God, look at it. Why are these Democrats complaining all the time? Look at them. They're just complaining. Like, this is something that everybody can do. And now they're complaining about it, whatever. Like, what's really important, I think, with these things is if you can control the narrative from the beginning. So if you can paint Republicans as obstructionists, then you get to use that going forward. That becomes the narrative. Right. Whereas if you just sit back and wait, then the Republicans get to paint the narrative and say, oh, look, they're just complaining. They don't want to actually get anything done, whatever. And they get to kind of put that on you. And unfortunately, for the majority of Americans, like, that's kind of how it goes. Like, yeah, people like ourselves, like, we're very well informed. We read a lot. So, like, we don't really care. Like, I don't care what a Republican says, right? I'm probably going to vote the way that I'm going to vote no matter what. But for your more average citizen who's not as, like, plugged into everything, if they hear the general narrative vote, Democrats are complainers. Like, when it comes time to vote, they're going to see that D next to their name and you go, maybe not. I've heard those guys are complainers. So it's all, you got to just get ahead of it and do that. Like, that's one thing that I would like to see Democrats do more, is get ahead of things and control that narrative more, because Republicans have learned how to do it really, really well over the past several presidencies.
Yeah, I don't like the language in this little copy either that says Democrats are trying to frame this as, and I'm like, no, actually, that actually is the case. They're not trying to frame it as that's happening. So you in the media, stop trying to frame something that isn't frameable. But that's how they teach journalists, is to find the frame. And I'm like,
right, we have to be as fair as we can. But I hear you.
Yeah, and I'm like, take the frame off. Take a look at what's actually happening. Where's your truth to power, thing?
Well, that's what we've been doing for the last almost hour now. So.
Oh, it's us?
It's us.
We have to. I'm a journalist, luckily. So really? Oh, all right.
No, I get you. No, the journalists. This is a cool thing that we can talk about. Journalists, like you said, don't like to seem to be partisan, because then people like them less. But that ship sailed. So at this point, like, who gives a shit? That's where I'm at, right? Like, we have a bifurcated media.
Bifurcated media.
And that's because of a variety of reasons. Not all of them are actually bad or not all of them are bad, and a lot of them are understandable. What I should say. That's what I was getting at. For example, the spread of massive alt media makes it so people can look at whatever they want. They can have all their confirmation biases checked, and their cognitive dissonance kept in check by those checks, and so there's no reason to go venture out. So we at Crowdsourced Politics, the Crowdsourced Tribune, encourage you to not do that. Get out of your echo chamber. Watch people other than us. Although we love you, watch us, please. For the love of God, I need the views. Give me the fucking views. But please also, try to understand at least where the other side is coming from. I do try to have some conservatives on here from time to time. Not all of them are as accommodating for my schedule as I would like, so they're not always here. But you will see conservatives on here from time to time, and we try to be fair to what are they actually coming from. So, but with that said, there's somebody that's not being fair, and that is Kyrsten Sinema. And another public response to Kyrsten Sinema, continued opposition to Biden's agenda. 5 military veterans who have served on an advisory committee have resigned their positions today. In a scathing letter obtained by the New York Times, the veterans took Ms. Sinema to task for her refusal to abolish the filibuster and her opposition to parts of Mr. Biden's multi-trillion-dollar social safety net, education, climate, and tax plan, stances that have stymied some of his top priorities. Quote, "You have become one of the principal obstacles to progress, answering to big donors rather than your own people," the veterans wrote in a letter that is to be featured in a new advertisement by Common Defense, a progressive veterans activist group that has targeted Ms. Sinema. "We shouldn't have to buy representation from you, and your failure to stand by your people and see their urgent needs is alarming," they added. The veterans who are making a public divorce from her on Thursday have sat on Miss Cinema's advisory board since 2019. As part of a group of 20, she selected for her office liaison to Arizona service member community. Democrats were out desperately trying to help her win the seat and now feel like, what was it for? Sylvia Gonzalez Andesh, one of the veterans who signed the letter, said in an interview, "Nobody knows what she is thinking because she doesn't tell anybody anything. It's a very sad to think that someone who you worked that hard for to get elected is not even willing to listen." So even her own people are like, "Fuck you." Now is this to her character? Is this that she was bought off? Was she always a Republican in a Democrat sweet trans color suit? I don't know. What are your guys' thoughts?
Yep. No, I know her.
100%?
Yeah. Oh no, I'm outing her right now. That is a creature of its own creation. It's an absolute amalgam of pure toxic. That thing is a construction.
Oof. Harsh words.
I will not even attempt to speak of that creature.
Damn, you're gonna get us canceled, Universal Discord. You're calling a woman that
Oh,
creature?
you can't. Cinema can't reach out on she can't reach out, and you know what I mean?
Mirror, mirror on the wall. Who's the cutest of them all? Not Cinema.
She was like that. She was like that from the get-go.
I will give you. I don't know her personally. I'm not from Arizona, so I don't know shit. But from what I've seen, she always seemed to be a little petty, at least a little bit. So
superficial much? Yeah. Something else going on behind the facade? Definitely. No, it was the ripple, like ever expanding ripple of suspicion and doubt started from the second the campaign was announced, what her ambition was.
Yeah.
And then there was the echo chamber around her. And we knew it was like, this is not going to end well. And that was the last time I was in Arizona. And I was just like, I'm washing my hands of this because I'm a veteran and indigenous there. So you can imagine the struggles we went through. And I was just like, this is not going to end well. This is not going to end well. And now here it rises, right? The truth, right? And I'm like, no, that person, Viper comes to mind.
I do want to say that I have read numerous reports of her wanting to be the next John McCain. And by that, she means like a maverick that goes against the party grain for the better good of her constituents.
When you say that, that means that you can't be held accountable. That's what you're planning. I mean, could you broadcast it a little louder and people still go, I don't know, I think I'll take a chance and against my gut and the hairs on the back of my head and all of my common sense. Yeah, I think I'll vote for her. Okay, let's do it. I mean it's ridiculous.
She talked a good game during the primaries. I can't hold too many people.
She knows exactly what to say. To pass is whatever she want to pass. She knows how to do that, but the loyalty was never there. It was always implied. Everybody. They were like,
Okay.
No. She her thank you gift was a little knife with your name etched in it, right? Shaped like a brick. Does that give you a clue?
She's, from what I'm hearing from you, Universal Discourse, is that she's doing leftists proud right now in the backstabbing game.
Is she lefty?
No, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I don't know what she is, but left of center or something. But yeah, no.
No,
it's gonna get worse from her. You'll see worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. Trust me.
To clarify, I mean, I was talking about the lack of loyalty here that a lot of people on the left seem to have. But
well, I get to be apolitical, so that's why I sit over there in my moon lodge and I only show up on your panel, and then I just drink my tea and tell you stories and entertain you and translate the Supreme Court, judgments for you. Yeah,
for sure. Drummer, what about you?
I actually think this is pretty good. Hopefully, because in the U.S. we love our veterans, or at least publicly we all say we love our veterans. It's very, it's like not very popular. Well, it's not very popular publicly to say anything negative about veterans, right? And I mean, you can, but like,
Really?
if you have any sort of like reputation, I feel like usually people shy away from doing that. Like no politician will ever say anything negative about veterans. Like that would be like a death
Well,
sentence,
until
right?
you go against their pet project, anyways.
Correct.
Sure.
That's
Republicans
Republicans
right, sure.
love, just like the Dixie Chicks. Republicans love veterans until they don't.
Right. But like what I'm saying is, I feel like
Yeah.
that this group that has left, that they're all like publicly veterans. That's a something where it's gonna be very difficult to disparage them, because then it's like, well, why are you why you don't support veterans? Like that's crazy. So at least they have that going for them. And hopefully something like this, it's sort of like a walkout, right? Like eventually either she'll get the idea or her constituents will get the idea. People who have the voting in her state, hopefully just change their minds. They see, hey, people are abandoning her left, right, and center. Her own party doesn't like her. Like hopefully that jogs some people's memory. I mean, unfortunately, it probably won't. Yeah, because the old, like the way we know how a lot of these elections work, you get in once and then, well, you die in that position, because there's no way, you very rarely get voted out unless you do something super egregious.
Look at the all-star cast of the governors of Arizona in the last 20 years. Take a look at that. Then you take veterans. Okay, good. The VA facilities in Arizona are the worst in the country in history.
Okay.
How do you think they feel about veterans?
I mean, I guess it's two different. Your public opinions, but I feel like I guess it's like nationally, like you don't, like you very rarely hear people speaking negatively about veterans.
They don't
know
what
like,
to say.
But I think Cypher was
right. Okay,
like,
no, I mean,
only when it suits them, though. I think you're right with that.
True, but just veterans walking out is also gonna open the door for people to disparage veterans, because it's like, well, what do you expect? Do you have privilege? Yeah. Do you expect to be treated differently? Is that what's going on there? So that whole can of worms could.
I'm just kidding.
Knowing Arizona, that's just gonna. They're just gonna get their can opener and pry that bad boy open, and well, let's, crap on the veteran. Let's put them in their place, because that's how they see things.
Mm-hmm.
They put you in your place.
Do you think
very much
just like Arizona, like culture? That's how they operate there.
Oh man, I don't have time to talk to you about Arizona, but there's a reason Seth MacFarlane hates them. So
fair enough.
All right then. Well, everybody, thank you again for joining the news roundup. For those that have just joined now or have joined in the last 10 minutes, this is the Crowdsourced Politics News Roundup, or the CSP News Roundup. We do this every Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to around 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you have something that you would like to see on the show or would like to join the show yourself, go ahead and reach out to us. You can hit us up on Twitter at Crowdsourced Poll. You can also hit us up on Facebook with the Facebook group Tribune, the Crowdsourced Tribune, or join the group group Tribune Commons, or join the Discord. Links will be above and below after the video. So, moving on, we have some not big news, but some important news coming out from the Supreme Court. So President Biden's has appointed a commission to study the current structure of the Supreme Court, released draft material last week, and held a public meeting last Friday. The 36-member commission's mandate is to provide analysis and appraisals of the current debate over the court, not to provide recommendations for changes. Progressives and money Democrats want an expansion of the court. Many moderates and virtually all Republicans say that would amount to court packing. There are 13 federal circuit courts that are currently broken up by region, and currently only 9 Supreme Court justices. That number has not changed since 1860. Proponents of expanding the court say that it just makes sense to add 4 more seats, so that each justice oversees 1 circuit court. Democrats introduced the Judiciary Act in April of this year in an effort to do just that. We talked on the news roundup about the court's seeming lean to the political right, and it's that lean that prompted then candidate Biden to promise the formation of the commission. So this is something that, as already stated, we've talked about pretty extensively. I think we haven't done an official episode on the court on the podcast, but this is something that is important. Personally, I have said this before, and I'll say it again anytime that we bring this up, is that I think we need a constitutional amendment for the court. I think lifetime appointments to the court is a bad idea. I think there should be probably restricted to between 12 years and 18 years. Theoretically, that would mean that every president, or every 4 years, one person gets a pick, and it kind of just rotates every 4. I think it's 4 to 6 years. So be a new justice on the Supreme Court, and it would reduce the amount of wouldn't reduce the amount of political fighting, but the stakes. It would reduce the stakes of a Supreme Court seat, because there was always one retiring just in a few years. It might increase partisanship to an extent, but I think that ship has sailed, and it will make it to where generationally the court will evolve with the times, because we do have a living constitution, regardless of what anybody else would like to tell. But I would like your thoughts. Started with universal discourse last time. Let's go ahead and start with Drummer this time. Drummer, what are your thoughts?
Sure. Actually, I really like that idea. You said that if you have them set up in a system where, like, every so many years, like, there's one rotating out and one rotating in. I think that over time, because I think you're right. Like, right now, it seems almost like there's blocks. Like, it's like, okay, well, now we have a right-leaning court, so we know, next several years, or however long it's going to be until one of them either retires, passes away, whatever, until we actually get that change. Rotating it in would probably, in the long term, probably even the court out in terms of, like, leaning left, leaning right. We would probably end up with, over time, an even split between whether we'd probably have an even amount of left-leaning courts versus right-leaning courts. And I like the idea too. There's a guy on TikTok, and I wish I remembered what his account was, but his whole account is based on, like, he reviews, like, every Supreme Court case from, like, the beginning, the formation of the court, and goes on of, like, what the ramifications were. And, like, I've learned, it's really good. I learned a lot from it. And he really just highlights that need for, there should be one Supreme Court justice for each circuit court, to expand that. I think this was like 13, right? I just think we have better representation, a better, like, oversight of each thing. And then there'd be like a nice little pyramid of each court going up until you finally got to the Supreme Court. And it would represent it better. And I think that overall, like, I know, like, you were talking about the Constitution being a living document, like, 100%. I think people get so, like, locked into this idea of, this is what the Supreme Court, and this is what it is, and this is what it's going to be. And I think, like you shouldn't be afraid of change, right? Like, all Biden wants to do is he has a commission. They're going to be doing their review, and they're going to be looking at it. And I think you should be open to, reviewing all that stuff, because, it's been a while since anything's ever been changed, or if at all. And it's a continually improving process, and it should just be open to it. So if they come up with really strong evidence and say, hey, more justice on the Supreme Court would just do the service better, then sure, I'm open to it.
Well, universal discourse. Thoughts?
Yeah, the Supreme Court can't be partisan. There cannot be a left-leaning, right-leaning anything. These people have to be dedicated to the interpretation of the highest law of the land. So adding more, the only justification to me that's valid is because of the backlog. So rotating would cause too much turmoil in a critical function. Although I love the fact that the terms could be more of a cultural match generationally. That is going to be vital if the thing is going to stay functioning. It is the highest law in the land. It is America. Screw with it. That's it. Put the flag down. Let's go to the Bahamas, but not to Haiti. There's no point. So, I don't want it touched. I don't want these 3 people that this dude put on there because they're clearly partisan. I'm like, So what I think needs to be improved is that process of appointments, because these people have to be up there to do nothing but interpret constitutional law. That is their sole purpose. Have another purpose. They don't determine states' laws. They don't determine that is their purpose, is to render an opinion on constitutional law. Unlike other courts, if you want to overturn your prison sentence, you could go to the magistrate's court instead, for instance. Circuit court, district court. You don't go to the Supreme Court necessarily, unless it's a Fifth Amendment violation, for instance. Okay. So I want them untroubled, unhindered, unfettered, uncorrupted, functioning. If 5 more people will clear the backlog, it's not like you can just say, hey, John, you know, you watched LA Law a couple times. Why don't you apply for the job? Do you know what it takes to sit as a Supreme Court judge?
Well,
no one does.
It depends
no one
on who you
does.
ask.
You got 9 people, and unless they're talking, no one does. But no, you don't just sort of, I'll do it. I have this cute paralegal. It's going to be hot. No, you can't just do that. So where are you going to get the extra 5-6 qualified people? You'd have to, first of all, you'd have to get the people Obama tried to appoint, put them in there. That ought to piss them all off. No, we don't need any kind of rupture in that body. Mess everything else up, but not that one.
I think that ship's kind of sailed. There's been a concentrated effort by Republicans to use the court as a check against everything Democrats want to do, and this has been a thing. This has been a plan.
Get an oversight
since at least the late 70s, and with the Heritage Society and a bunch of other things. Now this isn't to say that the Heritage Society doesn't have some good ideas when it comes to interpretation of law, but they're very conservative leaning, and they have particular ideas about what legalism is, about what the originalist doctrine is, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, you have originalists versus progressivists, but any doctrine is you're going to have those two. Yeah. Right. But let it stay that way and let them resolve that.
But
I just need it to be,
if you're not giving, but it is partisan, in my opinion. Like, you can't.
Well, maybe they corrupted it that way, but I need it not to be. I want it not to be. And
that's why I want a constitutional amendment. So,
right.
This is why I wanted like a constitutional amendment. So my idea has been, and this has been my idea since before Merrick Garland got stonewalled and denied us his rightful seat on the Supreme Court. Should have been, no questions asked, he should have been approved. They slow walked it until he couldn't do it anymore. It was a political gamble that played off. Republicans, chef's kiss to that political.
That's when I started looking at another country to live in.
Chef's kiss to that political brinksmanship, because they won it, and they won it hard. But it was very bad for the country. So what I would like to see is for Democrats to come in, or hey, I'll take a Republican doing this. Republicans, take this idea. It's fine. I just want shit fixed. Okay. All right. Come in, say, get your 60 votes, and say, we're packing the court. We're going to add 20 justices to the court, and there's not a damn thing you can do about it. Or you pass you pass a constitutional amendment with 4 or 5 things or whatever it is that fix the court so no one can do this ever again. And it is the only way that I believe that you'll actually get a constitutional amendment through. You have to have the 60 votes, Congress and the presidency, to ram through justices like FDR tried to do. But instead of doing it to get some policies past court's obstructionism, you do it to get a constitutional amendment so no one can play fuck games with it anymore.
Well, you know how the Supreme Court was formed, don't you? You know how the decision read, don't you?
Are you meaning like Mulberry versus Madison, or are you talking about
actual right, how it was formed as it placed itself as the highest law in the land? The trouble is, if they're the ultimate oversight, well, how do you have the people whose job it is to revise the Constitution? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
To determine the constitutionality of revising something, revise the very document that gave them the authority to determine the constitutionality of something. So that is why they're not going for it. But it's perplexing to me. I just know that if it fails to function, It's pretty much stick a fork in it. It's done.
No, I mean,
That's what I
can't-
think.
Can't argue. I can't completely argue with you there, but I could. But in the interest of time, I won't. So
You
let's move
can.
on.
It's fine. I think it's probably, to me, the most important thing happening. So,
But in the interest of time, we have more stuff to cover with the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
So let's continue. So according to Politico, the U.S. Supreme Court declined on Tuesday to block a vaccine requirement imposed by Maine healthcare workers, the latest defeat for opponents of vaccine mandates. It was the first time the Supreme Court weighed in on a statewide vaccine mandate. It previously rejected challenges of vaccine requirements for New York City teachers and Indiana University staff and students. Justice Stephen Breyer rejected the emergency appeal, but left the door open to try again as the clock ticks on Maine's mandate. The state will begin enforcing it on October 29th. The court also refused to block the New York City requirement for teachers to be vaccinated by tomorrow at 5 p.m. or face suspension. Hey, USA Today reports that Associate Justice Sonia Sotomayor denied the emergency request without comment. A federal appeals court earlier this week permitted New York's mandate. In August, the Supreme Court declined to block a COVID-19 vaccine mandate. Oh, we've said this already. Sorry. So, vaccine mandates. The Supreme Court, this is something that Universal Square. Can you mute yourself while you're typing?
opening dinner.
Oh, opening dinner. Okay, cool. The Supreme Court has said that mandatory vaccinations, quarantines, and things like this has been part of American society since like 1820, with Philadelphia instituting a quarantine during a yellow fever epidemic that happened in Philadelphia. So this is one of those situations where this has been part of the America, and it's not necessarily a egregious coming for your freedoms, as people want to make it out to be. But what are you guys' thoughts? Since Universal Discourse is opening her food to get ready, let's go start with Drummer.
Sorry, I'm starving.
That's all good.
It's all good. Well, I mean, I guess my perspective when it comes to like a vaccine mandate. So my regular person job is I work at a hospital, and like a condition of my employment there was I had to get blood work done. I had to make sure all of my vaccines were updated for the ones that you usually get. I have to get a flu vaccine every year unless I had some sort of exemption. I've never fell into those categories, so I'm not a stranger to that. I understand what that's involved. But then again, when I took the job, I knew what I was signing up for. They told me when I was hired, "Hey, you want to work here? This is what you got to do. If you don't like it, take a hike. This isn't for you." So I think that, yeah, an employer or like when we talk about the state of Maine requiring certain people to have vaccines is something that they've done. It's something that certain professions do now. I think the only part that gets a little weird for me is if you're part of an organization that has never required any sort of vaccine, any sort of like proof that you have, a vaccine against something or whatever, is now that they're all of a sudden saying, "Oh, hey, by the way, we're requiring everyone to get vaccines now." That's the only part. Like, I understand why you do it. It's just, for me, that's the only part that's a little suspect for me, is when, like, why are you all of a sudden requiring this when you've in the past, say, never required any of this stuff before? So that's the only thing that's a little weird for me. But especially for like healthcare workers and stuff, like, it always baffles me like why healthcare workers are upset about this, because I'm like, wait a minute, but you work in a healthcare facility. You've had to have a flu shot every year. You probably have to get like, I know I have to get a tuberculosis test every year. Like, there's stuff I have to do as a condition of my employment, and I agreed to this when I signed up for it. Like, you should already know, like, this is a possibility. When I got the option to get the COVID-19 vaccine, I took it as soon as possible, because I knew, I was like, hey, because at the time I was still serving in the reserves and I work at a hospital. So I'm like, one of these two people is going to make me get this vaccine. I'm not going to have a choice about it. I'm not going to have a choice either way, because I know what I signed up for originally. So when it comes to like healthcare workers and stuff being required to get it, I don't understand like where the issue is, because again, you know what you signed up for. So
It's very interesting to me, especially with the healthcare workers, because you see it a lot with nurses, not so much with doctors. And it just goes to my point that I've made several times, is that nurses are just, they're not just regular people. They're highly educated, but they're still regular people, right? And they're going to fall into the same kind of stuff that everybody else falls into. Doctors are going to be the same way. You just might see less of them just because the level of education required is different. But it's just, you're going to see it. So don't be surprised when, Nurse Betty from, I don't know, Saskatchewan or whatever, suddenly starts spouting off Q nonsense about vaccines and how her kid's autistic now because they got the mRNA vaccine or whatever, right? I mean, just don't be surprised about these things. These are things that have been very much part of like the nursing profession and healthcare profession at large for decades. And it baffles me that people are like, all of a sudden like, well, they didn't know this. I'm like, do you not know a nurse at all? Like, did you not talk about their roles? Like, what is their,
Hey, Wordy.
what is they're doing? Education. Oh, no, Wordy. Okay.
Hey,
I don't know
Wordy.
where you're coming in, but this is very, education don't guarantee that they're using their brains.
Using their
100%.
brain.
That's kind of what I'm getting at here. So very good point about that.
Well,
what's going on?
These folks, like, they have a movement now. So now they're all bearing witness. That's what's going on.
All right.
They acting like they in church bearing witness. They have a movement now. So now they're coming out of the woodworks. Now you're realizing they were there all this time. They just like, you don't insult the military in public. Well, they kept their mouths shut. Now, mask off, literally. So the only thing I worry about with mandated vaccines, they're doing it in such short time. I'm one of those individuals who cannot receive a vaccination at all. So I'd be screwed. I wouldn't even have enough time to cough up the paperwork to show I can't take these. The next thing I know, I'd show up and be out of a job, for instance, if that were me. So where I'm coming from is there's a lot of people like that. They cannot take these vaccinations. They can't take inoculations. And, it's a big medical directive, huge letters. What do all of us do? What do we do? I mean, I don't mind mandating a mask. It's safety gear. I spent 10 years in the Air Force. Give me the mask, please. I don't care. But when we got into the military and they indoctrinated you and they force vaccinated you with zero testing to find out, and then they offered you the experimental vaccine, which you felt compelled to take just to get out of the line because they made you stand there. At that point, you'd been standing 8 or more hours.
I've never experienced that, man.
So you gave in because you wanted to, you couldn't even go to the bathroom. So they literally, yeah. So, I've gone through that where I dodged that, but that's my main concern. And there's a few other people in my community terribly concerned because they have that, there's no exemption, but that we have this, it's contraindicated with us. That do it at your own risk or don't do it at all. What do those people do? They didn't even think about it.
Yeah, I do think people, unfortunately, I think there's a lot of like obviously if you're somebody who can get vaccinated, it's a pretty good idea. But if like universal discourse, like you were saying, like if you're someone who you can't get them, like should be accommodations for that as well. I mean, like it's like the ADA, right? There's accommodations for people. But I think unfortunately this happens to be people from the left, they get like hyper fixated on this whole thing of like, oh my God, everyone's gotta get vaccinated. You gotta get vaccinated. You're not vaccinated. Why aren't you vaccinated? And it's like, well, hold on. Because first of all, there's legitimate reasons why people may not be able to get vaccinated. Like, and it sort of lumps it in where it's like, okay, well, you've given us this like my way or the highway attitude of it's either you are 100% pro-vaccine, like, or you're a QAnoner and there's no in between. It's like, well, no, there is an in between, right? Like there are some people who just can't get them, and there's considerations for that.
Yeah, it doesn't that comes from the I wouldn't call them radical left, but that comes from that false left, that hyper reactive LARPing left. It's a movement. Join in. Oh my God, we're having a revolution and I got maced. It's the same. You know, I was like, oh, darling, okay, you're a veteran now. Welcome home, baby. It's all right. You'll be all right. Yeah, it's not just that, hey, you really should. Let's get together and have group meetings and look over the terms of the vaccine together and look at the side effects. And let's all go support each other as we go to the doctor and find out, is this safe for us? Let's do that together. Knowledge, you know, let's do that together. Okay, that's what should be going on. Instead, it's not just that get your vax, it's that, oh, yes, and then you have to join the movement. I'm going to question your entire ideology, your intelligence, and your entire existence. You know, and I'm like, what? Can't you just drop all of that and simply talk about, here's the vaccines, here's your options, here's the research. Let's all sit down and decide whether we want to take this and how we want to take this, and who, you know. Why don't we? Why can't we do it that way? Where did all that? You know, it's fake when all this rah rah pom pom rhetoric shows up.
Mm-hmm.
This sort of witch hunt crap.
Yeah, well, I think I saw. I mean, I don't know how true it was because I saw it on Twitter. So, you know, grain of salt and all that. But
everywhere.
Yeah,
it's everywhere.
So, but it was someone saying something like after they'd gotten vaccinated, they were like, "Oh, I think I'm still going to wear a mask even though I don't have to, because I don't want people getting any ideas. Like if they see me without a mask, they're going to think I'm, you know, QAnon, anti-masker or whatever." And you know, I like people's response to that in general was kind of like joking and, "Oh, how that's funny, right?" And then, but like I looked at it and I was like, "That's kind of sad."
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like the whole point. I mean, we've heard from the very beginning of the pandemic, it was not, you know, we were constantly we did things in service of, you know, curbing the spread, right? And to then get to the point where like that was what we were told. We were told, hey, we get a vaccine in there, smooth sailing, it's all good. Now we have it, a bunch of people, tons and tons of people have it, and it's like, yeah, I should be able to walk around in public now without a mask because I got this vaccine, like everyone said we should, you know? And I don't think I should be worried about, oh my God, are people going to hate me now because they're going to think I'm some sort of like alt-right, you know, wild individual? Like, it shouldn't be that way. It should be like, hey, you know what? I bet they're vaccinated. Good for them. You know?
But see, the reason it's not is because of the politicization on the other side.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, we have to say what it is. Like the vaccines came into play. And then they still refused to get it. And then they were still refusing to wear masks. And they staged protests in like Denny's and fucking like they took off. What was it? It was like a food court. They took over an entire food court.
Yeah.
Like a mall and saying no mask wearing. I'm free. No muzzles and all that kind of garbage. And so of course it became politicized. And of course people were like, well, I don't want to be associated with them. But honestly, to your point, drummer, fuck those people. Do what you're supposed to do.
We're going to edit that out and post. It's fine. Fine.
Do what you're supposed to do. Don't worry about what they're thinking about you. The vaccine is widely available now. The majority of people do have it. The majority of adults, we crossed that 70% of adult threshold. I think we're approaching 80% now. Sadly, because more people started dying when all those people didn't get vaccinated and we had that eighth wave? I'm gonna call it the eighth wave because that sounds right. The eighth wave of COVID deaths that happened throughout the basically the South and the Bible Belt because of people refusing to get vaccinated, and so that's where we are now. Now, it would be remiss if I didn't bring this up. So this was in regards to where did it come from? Where did all this vitriol come from about must get a vaccine or else you're an evil person? Maybe it isn't me, said it comes from CNN centrists. No need to bullshit us. Now, I think it's more along the lines that centrists are more accepting of people that can't get vaccinated. In fact, I think that's very much I think the more liberal people are less likely to think of that, but the extreme liberals, I guess we can say them because they're not exactly leftists, are probably that way. I wouldn't say it's the centrist. I wouldn't say it's the CNN watchers. Maybe MSNBC. Maybe. I don't watch cable news, so I don't fucking know, right?
Me neither.
So yeah. And then here's another one. I like this. This is some banter. The African American Latin communities that are the majority of anti-vaxxers, fuck them. Yeah, I'll say it. Fuck them. Like, look, you can't get this on me, dude. All right. So maybe it isn't me. We have a long rapport. He has been a member of the community for a very long time. We've known each other for about 5 years now. So this is why I'm going to actually do this.
But maybe it isn't him.
Oh, maybe it's not him.
No.
Oh yeah, of course. But but the majority of anti-vaxxers aren't African Americans or Latinos. It's white conservative people. It's religious people. Now there is a sizable percentage of African Americans. At least there's been a couple of like protests in New York talking about government experiments and stuff like that. But it's not the majority. I don't know where you get that it might be the majority of them. It just isn't. So
It just isn't.
I'm gonna correct that right there for you. But no hard feelings, bro. I understand why you're saying that, because that's been a lot of alt media has been talking about that. So alt media, not alt-right media, alt media has been talking about it. They've been playing it up a bit. So I understand why you would say that. And there are some in those communities that are anti due to prior government fuckery. So, but had to put that out there. I think we covered this topic fairly extensively, so let's go ahead and move on to another culture war issue, because of course it is. You can't have the SCOTUS without having culture war. Now, this is a case that started back in 2015. So a high school football coach was fired in 2015 for refusing to stop holding post-game prayers. Received support for reinstatement this week from 24 Republican attorney generals. According to Fox News, the group, led by Arizona Attorney General Mark Brodovich, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, fuck you, and Alaskan Attorney General Craig Taylor, filed an amicus brief on Tuesday asking the High Court to review a Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals ruling earlier this year that determined that Brementon School District in Washington State lawfully fired Joe Kennedy when he defied its order to not pray. Americans do not abandon their religious liberties at the door of their workplace, Brodovich said in a statement. Especially at the moment in our country's history, it is imperative that the heavy-handed government be restrained from trampling on our rights to personal expression as recognized and protected by the First Amendment. The amicus brief argues that the Ninth Circuit's ruling goes against well-established precedent and threatens First Amendment rights, and that its justification for district's quote-unquote discriminatory actions create problems for public employers and employees. Kennedy was initially suspended and then fired in 2015 after he refused a school district order to end his post-game prayer sessions, which had begun with him silently praying alone on the field before players joined him. Now, to give a little bit more backstory about this, to give a little more backstory about this particular coach was told to stop because he was leading the prayer. And even though some students willingly joined him, there were other complaints that they felt from students and parents that they felt pressured to join him in this prayer because he was an authority figure working in an official capacity of the school. This is where you get the separation church and state, the whole you can't lead prayer sessions in school court case from, was it the 60s? I want to say it was the 60s, where you couldn't do this. And so because he refused to stop and he was like, it's my God-given right, lead this prayer for these kids, he was fired. So thoughts about it?
Well, I can go first, I guess.
Go ahead.
So my thought about it is, okay, so if it sounds to me like from what we know that this was something that the coach did on his own, and then some of his players joined in, and then there was a little bit of, I guess, that mob mentality where students that weren't doing it felt kind of pressured, like, oh, this is like a big deal, and I'm like the only one sitting out. I get that. I get if you're feeling alienated, obviously, like especially when it comes to I don't know, was this a high school coach or
Mm-hmm.
you know? having been a high school student at one point in my life, like I understand that when you're part of a team or part of this group, like it's very, very important to feel like you belong and feel like you're part of the team and to be accepted. So I could understand 100% understand that if you feel that like, hey, the coach and 90% of the team are all doing this, and I'm like that one guy. Like no one wants to be that guy, right? But it's hard for me to say, oh, this guy was doing something wrong, because like if it depends, I guess, how it was presented, right? Like if this coach said, hey, this is what I'm going to do, this is and left the door open and said, look, if you want to join me, that's great. If not, hey, no harm, no foul. That's one thing. It's a different story if then like he got the players together and was like, well, God damn it, we're going to pray. Like that's a different story. But perhaps maybe there was coercion. I don't know. It's hard because on the one case I want to say like, hey, it's up to them. He wants to do that. That's up to him. If students want to join in, they can make that free choice to join in or not. They can't be forced to. As for people feeling coerced to it, I don't know if he needed to lose a job over it. That could have been something that was handled by an administration or that was reconciled between the coach and the team. Maybe you need to have a mediated discussion between the players and the coach and say, hey, some of us are feeling like we're pressured to join in and we feel like we won't be accepted if we don't do it. Maybe it comes to that. I don't know if it needed to escalate as far as to have this individual lose their job over it.
Uh-huh.
Do you want to go universal discourse, or would you like me to?
Yeah, I'd actually have to see the filing and the policy to say why they were allowed to fire him if he prays silently. Right, you can't obstruct that. The players join him of their own volition. Can't obstruct that either.
So that's how it's, just to be clear, that's how it started, and then it became like an official thing. So it was like, hey, he was praying by himself, and then some students joined him, and then he was like, hey, he went out and be like, hey, you can join me if you want, but because of kids. But I just wanted to make that clear that it wasn't just him praying alone. It became an official part of the team.
Yeah, I'd have to actually see the actual filing and description because it seems like, yeah, I'd have to actually see the document, the actual filing and the ruling with the detail of it to understand exactly how this got this way. I mean, if he was coercing them, boop, out. Or it could have been where he was standing. Or it could have just been he has a habit of bucking administrative policy in the first place, and they finally got the guy because that was their only out. I mean, I'd really have to look at the actual language of the complaint and the opinion. This isn't sufficient in this case. It sort of doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I think that's what I was trying to get at. And that it seems like there's not enough facts here to be able to determine one way or the other.
Details, yeah. There needs to be some details and then the opinion. I'd love to see that. Should have looked that one. Oh, next time. Yeah, I'll look that one up. Do you have any of that? Do you have the actual opinion cipher that was rendered? A ruling?
I would have to look it up again. I did look it
okay.
up, but I don't have
I think, maybe next time, could we revisit this with having actually read the opinion?
Sure.
Because this is a classic First Amendment.
So this is what I was going to say. This is one of those tricky situations when it comes to kids. So as being an authority figure leading during an official school function, if you do it as part of a team, then you can be told to stop doing these kind of things because it looks as though you are trying to get the rest of the people that you're in charge of to do it, even if that's not what you're doing. So
because of his authority.
Because it's kids.
Correct.
So
correct.
If it was a post-game thing that happened, 20 minutes or so after the game, then that can come into the situation where like, no, this is something that people went and did on their own and there's no official school capacity of it. But this was right after the game. This is like as soon as like the last second on the clock ticked, they would all get together and they would do this prayer session. And so that's where the sticky widget is on this kind of thing.
Maybe.
It might not be intentional coercion, but we're talking about kids, and we have to keep in mind that kids are easily impressionable. They are less likely to say no to authority figures and this sort of thing, even among high school students. So
Evidently, so are most adults in America, so that's fine. But many of them also never survived high school. No, but what I mean is, I would like to see, regardless of who, the complaint. I want to see the plaintiff. I want to see that filing.
Right.
I'd like to see why they were complaining and then what the decision was based on.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think it goes to go back to the point of what Cypher was saying with authority figures. I think a lot, depending on the culture of that sports program, a lot of people, a lot of young high school students, especially, I feel will do everything they can to like appease that coach or to look good in front of them, because at least when I was in high school, there was this, I don't want to say it was a myth, but there was this hopeful of like the varsity athletes and stuff that like this was going to be their big break. They're going to be an all-star in high school. They were going to play this sport in college, and like that was going to be their full ride, and it was going to be an easy life from here on in.
Yeah.
So I can see that mentality kind of taking over and saying like, oh, I got to really look good in front of the coach here, because if they like me, then they'll start me more, and then I'll look better, and that's my ride, my free ride to college or whatever. And there is kind of that. For some reason, I mean, my mother was a guidance counselor for many years, and she would always run into every year a student whose parents were like, well, what about these full ride sports scholarships? Doesn't everyone get those? And it's like, no, nobody gets those. But like, it's so rare. I remember, as a brief story, my mother had a kid who was an incredibly good fencer. And he got a full ride, and he was one of 2 people in the country that got a full ride fencing scholarship. Just to give you how like an idea of how limited these scholarships can be sometimes, like so, but there is that I guess you want to call it like the rat race or whatever. I think people get very hung up on it, and they assume like I've got to really impress the coach, whatever. And there's also like, I feel like there's like soft coercion, where if you're in the prayer circle with coach, and every game coach is saying like, oh man, you know how cool so-and-so is? He's always in the prayer circles after the game. Or perhaps unintentionally, he gave them favorable treatment, and other students saw this who maybe weren't participating and took that to mean, oh, maybe we got to do this. This is kind of weird. Hey, why am I not getting started as often? Why am I, not treated as kindly during warm-ups or whatever? And that may have been the situation, but I think universal discourse is right in that, like, you want to see the file, like what was really going on, because right now, like, we can speculate, we can say, hey, maybe this was the case, but we don't know for sure. So like I said before, I think having the guy lose his job was like a little much, when there were probably other avenues they could have pursued to like solve the issue.
That I can agree. That I can say now. Yeah, I think that's a bit much. I don't know, something automatically I know something else is going on. So I really want to see the legal language.
And I think that's fair. But we should move on. So if you're just now joining, again, Crowdsourced Politics News Roundup, 8 p.m. Eastern to about 10 p.m. Eastern. If you have any ideas about what you would like us to cover on News Roundup, here's how to let us know. Again, go ahead and hit me up on Twitter at Crowdsourced Poll. That is that's a good, easy way to get me and get memes, and whatever else I feel like doing. You can also join the Discord. Links above and links will be below. You can join the Facebook group at /group/Tribune Commons. And yeah, if you want to be on here, if you want to get your questions answered, if you want to call in, hit us up on any of those means, and we will be able to accommodate accordingly. And we just got a follow. Thank you for the follow. Oh, come on. No. Come on. Not reading that one.
I think they're going to make this like a ritual.
Trolling my channel. I'm like, I had 6 people watching right now, and you're gonna still troll? Come on.
It's easy to troll. You had another one, but you ignored him. So
yeah, I didn't get the name until I was reading it. Anyways,
yeah, but you're being noticed.
I am being noticed. Yeah. Thank you. Yes, notice
me.
Isn't that how you
know you've made it big? When you finally have haters, that's how you know.
That's what I need. I need an antagonist. I'm actually taking applications for a nemesis. Please reach out. We'll get it going.
Oh God.
Superhero arc coming at you.
When you get them, will you guys do a debate on my Circle of Iron?
Sure.
So I can watch you, because I saw you just tear into a debate when you weren't even trained. You just sat down and I went, ew. He just kind of he starts gnawing like a Wolverine, and I was like, oh, yeah. So let me know who the nemesis is. We'll put you in the masks and cape, and it'll be.
We can go full lucha libre in this. Yes,
that's what I was gonna say. Exactly.
I'm here for this. So yes,
that's exactly what I want.
Taking Nemesis applications. But we do need to move on, so let's go ahead and get into some more news. So, as Universal Discourse has alluded to throughout the program, the Haitian Gang 400 Oiseaux kidnapped 17 missionaries who were in the country being Haiti, build houses over the weekend, including an 8-month-old infant and 4 children ranging in ages from 3 to 15. 16 of the hostages are Americans and 1 is Canadian. The gang has demanded $17 million for their release. Honestly, pocket change, just give it to him. No, I'm kidding.
He doesn't know any better.
But more than 100 people were kidnapped in Haiti in the first part of October, which led to a strike on Monday that closed businesses and schools and shut down public transportation. It was another blow to the Haiti's already depressed economy. Also on Monday, Haitian citizens took to the streets in Port-au-Prince to protest the surge in kidnappings, as well as the response to the earthquakes and the assassination of their president this summer. Protests are a typical thing at this time of overwhelming poverty, which is blamed for the rise in violence. So, Haiti, complete shit show. We talked about it before. Natural disasters, political disasters, etc. Now it's directly impacting Americans that are there and Canadians. Can't forget about our brothers to the north, or brothers and sisters in the north. Canadians who are just trying to help build Haiti. So what do you think this means? What do you suspect that it might get more direct engagement in Haiti from America and Canada, or do you think it's just gonna be like, hey, hands off, man, we're done with this? Universal Discourse, why don't you start us off?
Can you say that again? What's your question? What do I think of this?
Well, do you think it will get America and maybe Canada to get more directly involved in what is happening in Haiti right now with the political instability, and maybe some more direct aid? Or do you think at this point, hey, we're done with this, we're taking a step back?
That's not why he's doing that.
Who's he?
So the gang lord that's not at all what he's trying to do. He's not holding them hostage to get attention for the plight of Haiti.
No. I know. I wasn't implying that. I'm saying, like, as a response to the fact that these kidnappings are happening, do you think America or Canada will get more directly involved? Wasn't meaning to imply that that's why he's doing it.
Yeah. Well, they're going to have to if they're going to get their people out.
Sure.
I mean, yeah. So he's calling thunder. So for him, fais attention, sauve les petits. Mister, you better be careful what you wish for before you draw down thunder. Because I feel like that's about to be the end of Haiti. Because the gangs have always been something atrocious. But what they really got angry is after the earthquake, what the Red Cross did to them. And then continuous. They completely defrauded. They took all the money and never even showed up.
Mm-hmm.
And all these promises. And they've had it. You got to remember that was the first real rebellion in the New World.
Mm-hmm.
So they carry that entire history with them. So Haiti is a small place. And it's been really hit. Earthquakes, did the deforestation, everything you can think of. And tourism was its only real revenue.
Yeah.
So it's been, the gang situation has been, really bad for a long, long, long time. I think it's just what's happened there is tragic.
Yeah.
It's tragic. To go in there and then further oppress and subjugate them. Shit. I hope not. And pay the man his money and make sure he lets them go, because crying blood, he may think he's the last king of Scotland at this point. No one knows.
But we don't negotiate with I'm kidding, obviously.
Oh, he's not a terrorist.
We don't negotiate with kidnappers, etc. But to give a little bit more context to what Universal Discourse is saying about the crying blood and all that.
Wait.
Go ahead.
We did.
What do you mean we did?
When I was in the Air Force. And
no, that's why it was a joke.
We definitely negotiate with kidnappers and terrorists. I don't want anybody believing that's the truth. That is not the truth. You pay them their money and you get them out. Yeah, okay, anyway, go ahead. Go ahead.
It may encourage more to happen, or it may not. There's mixed results actually about studying. Economists and sociologists have studied this pretty extensively. You can look it up online. Pretty
it's a cultural tradition.
But to give more context to this, Wilson Joseph has said, quote, "I swear by thunder that if I don't get what I'm asking for, that I will put a bullet in the heads of these Americans."
And swearing by thunder means he's calling on the law of the spirit of revolution, where all the white people were killed. It's not a good thing.
Thank you for that context, because I did not know that.
They're Voodoo people. They're the Gede.
Yeah.
This is bad.
He also
Pay
said,
him. Pay him. If you ever want to see him again.
Sorry about that. He also said, "You guys make me cry. I cry water, but I'm going to make you cry blood."
Cry blood.
So this is a very big threat of him going to kill these people unless he gets his $17 million. So we'll see how negotiations play out. Drummer, what are your thoughts, though, since I gave Universal her time?
Sure. I'm not super familiar with the cultural difference, struggles and stuff that they go on. I know that in Haiti, I know that the earthquakes and all sorts of it are absolutely devastating for them. So there's no doubt about that. As far as kidnapping, I don't have much experience with that. I think I'm agree with both of you in that, look, 17 million is really not an atrocious amount of money. I mean, we're just talking about a $2 trillion reconciliation budget. So I think 17 million is pocket change, right? Because there's no doubt in my mind that if we really wanted to get those people back, we could pull a SEAL Team 6 and we could run in there, do whatever, but that would not do us any favors, geopolitically in the long run. That would just make us more hated when we could use that opportunity to either build a friendlier relationship with them. So I think it's important that if you want to curb gang violence in a country like that, I think one of the ways you could possibly do it is help out the average non-gang member citizen. Say, hey, look, get them food, supplies, rebuild houses, whatever, it is that you have to do. And when you can show that you're making that good faith effort and you're helping them out more so than the random gang, the idea of the gang becomes less popular. But like I said, I'm not super informed on the situation in Haiti, so I may just be talking on my ass here. So
no, perfectly fair. No, I think you actually make a good point. Haiti does need a lot of rebuilding, especially because they're still recovering from the 2010 earthquake, because scams are going to scam, right? People donated all that money to Red Cross and not much of it didn't go to Haiti. In fact, the Red Cross came out and said basically we're not obligated to give all that money to Haiti. We're just the same thing when all that money was donated for 9/11. We're not obligated to do that. We did our part. We did some things. But we have other things we need to do too. Pay our CEO among them.
Exactly. They admitted complete fraud. Yeah. It's complete.
It's very bad. Yeah, the Red Cross, despite that, the Red Cross still does good things, but they can get scummy with these giant waves of donations, and that's kind of one good, another maybe it isn't me saying, yet they come to America, our leaders fly them back quick. Fair point, honestly, with how much devastation's going on in Haiti. You're damned if you do, damned if you don't. Accidentally lost you there for a second.
I lost you guys.
Oh, okay.
Funny. You guys froze, and then I winked out. It's Halloween.
Oh, okay. But that's a fair point. And like I said, when we talked about that on the news roundup, because we do this every week, I also said that it was a bad thing that happened, and I would not want to see it happen again. But we are pressed for time. I want to get through some of these other stories quickly. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to open it up to what we want to talk about. Some of the big things that are still left to talk about is Trump launching his new social media platform. I think we can get that out of the way pretty quick, but we can also skip it because whatever. Whether Striketober, and definitely have to finish up with some news of the weird. So, and then also there's an interesting thing that came out of Texas with quote unquote 2 sides of the Holocaust. Of these 4 topics, 3 topics, let's pick 2. What do you guys think?
I think
let's go with the 2 sides of the Holocaust one.
Right.
Oh, really? That one's gonna be pretty.
I think it'll be quick, but it's something that I actually self promote for a little bit. One of my first videos on YouTube of when I started changing over from gaming to doing politics was specifically that Senate Bill 8 that they're talking about there.
Okay.
Was a whole breakdown. I read through the entire thing and went because I saw some really dumb things people were saying on Twitter about it, and I'm like, I go through this because it's not as unfortunately. So the bill was a response to something that Texas Democrats put forward that had a bunch of requirements for recommended reading and things that they wanted public school students in Texas to make sure that they got to make sure they covered. And this was a bill that had already passed. And then the Senate Bill 8 was one that was in process. And at the time when I did my video, that hadn't been passed yet. So the sort of alarmism of, oh my God, they're going to be teaching white supremacy in Texas schools was a little outrageous since that bill had not passed. When it comes to the whole 2 sides thing, there was a line in the proposed bill saying that there are that if you wanted to teach a controversial subject, that you as the teacher were responsible for presenting it in a fair manner, and that if there was any, backlash or anything you got from it, that that was on you. That there was going to be no school board or Department of Education support for you if you chose to talk about these quote controversial subjects. Personally, I think in this story, when they say 2 sides of the Holocaust, it sounds like to me that the person who said that Gina Petty just is not good at off the cuff remarks and was pressed to give an example, and that's just the first thing that came to her mind, and ended up being a really bad example. So that's kind of that's the read I got on it. But the whole 2 sides thing, I think, comes from that proposal, and that if you're going to teach a quote controversial subject, you have to be impartial, and you can't say one or the other was better or worse. And I think people have taken that to a bit of the extreme, especially when it comes to talking about things like the Holocaust and whatever. We as a society have very much agreed that you can say that, hey, the Holocaust was bad, it was wrong. I don't think whatever side of the political spectrum you're on, I think we all generally agree on that. But so that's basically the long and short of it. I think that she just made a vocal misstep and picked a really bad example, and now is getting dragged for it.
Sure. But so that we are fully transparent about what is going on, we're going to go ahead and share the video of this really quick here. Hopefully it doesn't did it jack it up? Okay, good. It didn't jack it up. All right, that's what I was worried about. So we're going to do this. Listen to this now. Have everybody. So we have it from the horse's mouth.
As you go through, just try to remember the concepts of 3979 and make sure that if you have a book on the Holocaust, that you have one that has other.
How do you oppose the Holocaust?
Believe me, that's come up.
So number the stars, which is
So that's it. That's the full audio clip of that. One of the things, so I live in Texas. I'll just say my piece just really quick with it. I live in Texas. This is one of those situations where I think I agree with Drummer about this particular case here, but I also believe, and I've talked to a ton of teachers, that this concern is valid and understandable given the amount of political vitriol that and anti quote unquote CRT politicians that are in Texas and how many want to sue and prevent these kind of things from being taught are, and the fact that Abbott has suggested patriotic education and things like that. I think the teachers are kind of in a bind with what is and is not acceptable to teach about not just controversial issues, but specifically with things like our racist past. So I think that that's a valid concern. Go ahead, Universal Discourse.
Okay, so this is all absolute bullshit. This is absolute bullshit. This is there's no way that a teacher given a text who preps as I do as a teacher weeks in advance is suddenly asked to provide multiple perspectives. No, your job is to provide the teacher with those perspectives if you're going to proscribe anything. So nobody there could possibly interpret those scuffed ass instructions. It's absolute bullshit. When I was in school, they brought actual Holocaust survivors and modern living Germans to talk about it in person. That ended that conversation. There was no text. So what they're doing, absolute bullshit. It's a bunch of fundamentalists. I don't know who these people are, Kool-Aid pouring. No. You can't do it as a teacher. If the rule is overnight, multiple perspectives, your institutional responsibility to me as an instructor is to provide me with the perspective that you have endorsed and paid me to teach. If I disagree, I can leave. But they didn't do that. And her misstep, I don't think it was a misstep. I think that woman is just too stupid to be involved in education.
Could be.
So her and Simba in Arizona, go fuck yourselves.
Damn.
That's the end of my comment. And I'm gonna eat this ham is delicious, by the way. I'm sorry, but I'm starving. I worked an 8-hour shift and I earned dinner, so I'm gonna eat this. Okay, that's all I had to say. I'll wait for your
independent thought.
Your chips.
I like I said, I don't know if this particular person is too stupid because I wasn't in the room. From what I just heard and what I've heard previously, it sounded like these are one of those things that quote unquote have come up where it's just like, hey, look, like you don't want to get in trouble under this new law, provide this material, and that'll stop you from getting in trouble because then nobody can tell you that that you can be, you're not following the law. I think that might have been for this particular instance. But let's see, a school district spokesman initially said that Petty's advice was the result of the district's effort to comply with Senate Bill 3. State Senator Brian Hughes, an East Texan Republican who wrote the bill, denied that it required teachers to provide opposing views about what he called matters of good and evil. Yeah, that's bullshit because, again, they don't want to teach CRT, and to them, CRT is civil rights stuff. Like, they don't want to teach about, like, pain and history and things like that. They don't... Okay, one of the big things is that the Texas Rangers are very well, like, loved and respected, especially among conservative groups in Texas. And they were absolute shit. Racist fucking scallywags for most of their fucking existence up until the modern day. It was basically like the 60s happened, and then that's when they started to get a bit better. But all the way from their inception to about the 60s, 70s, they were completely absolute racist pieces of crap for a lot of the things. And one of the things that they recently did was they had land that was on a Native American, I want to say it was a sacred site. It could have been a burial ground, but I don't know the exact particulars. And they were asked to not build there, and there was court proceedings to not build their museum on this site. And they went ahead and did it anyways. Those are the kind of things they don't want talked about in Texas. So to maybe it isn't me's point, and other people, it might be like, hey, this sounds a little too out there. It really isn't that far out there. And I agree with Drummer's point about maybe this person just misspoke and was trying to think of things, but the concern is there. Trust me. So, any final thoughts before we move on? to the next
Yeah.
topic?
I think the former leader of the National Socialist movement, the neo-Nazi party in America, would probably have a whole lot to say about that last clip
Yeah, for sure.
as to what happens when you start to introduce an opposing point of view.
Yep.
And he'll be happy to show up and educate a few folks or explain a few things if you want him to.
Well, let's see. We'll
Scared
go
of
with we will end with a news of the weird story here. So it is Halloween season, everybody. So we're gonna end the news roundup with some news of the weird about a horrified toy that a mother was brought back to a mother by her daughter. So from the Mirror, and take it with it. I mean, it's the Mirror, right? It's a little bit of a tabloid, but they report on these things kind of well, so whatever. A mom has told of her horror after her 6-year-old daughter brought home a new favorite toy that frightened the life out of her. And we will play the video from the Mirror simply because it's might really get skipped the ad because I didn't have it preloaded. I'm sorry, everybody. I'm sorry. Sorry, I didn't have it preloaded.
Stupid ads. Oh my god.
But essentially, it's a horror story. A horror story in a thing, and I don't care about Bro Austin Parks. Oh, I actually do. But not for the news roundup. But yeah, it's not letting me skip. I love everything. What? And I clicked on it. All right. Sorry, everybody. This is not the last time this will happen. I assure you. I am very bad when it comes to preloading technology.
Media.
Please don't say it was one of them toys. No, it's not one of those toys. It was.
That's when I first read that. I really thought that's what it was.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Oh my god!
No,
I thought it was like Linda Blair's head, and it spit out pea soup.
All right. So unmute. Go ahead and put this on here. Band it, and here we go. Look how happy she is.
Oh my god.
So there you go, folks. That is our news of the weird story. What do you think this means? Does this mean anything? Is this just cute? Like, it's Halloween. We had to do it's Halloween time. We had to do a little Halloween little theme there. So, like, do you think her mother has a right to be scared? Or do you think this is just kids being kids?
I don't think that was meant to be a child's toy.
It was not.
And I think that because she saw the baby doll thing and that she, and that looks like, like a zombie fan's toy.
It was bought by the grandparents too.
Maybe it's grandparents' revenge. Maybe one time, maybe they pawned their daughter off on the one time, and they were like, you know what? It's the last time we're ever babysitting.
Maybe they thought it was a novelty. That's pretty scary.
It was so
it's horrible.
Sweet, though. It was like the little girl was so happy in her horrorness.
Oh, the living are quite sweet. It's the dead babies we have to start worrying about. And that child was dead. And I don't like no dead baby sitting up on a rocking horse frightening my child or me or anyone else. It was like no children and no dead things sitting up in there. No, wrong. I think it was they bought a novelty and they thought it was going to be funny, but it was probably absolutely horrifying to the mother. And the poor little girl was like, "Oh, look, mommy, it's a dead thing." You and Jeffrey Dahmer.
Oh no, the little girls looks too. Anyways, I agree though. It was probably a dark sense of humor kind of thing. But
poor little girl, she's traumatized for life. Her fashion sense
she was
is warped.
fine.
Forever.
Hey, future goth. That's what we have here, folks.
Today looks
like a goth was born and the world grew a little darker.
That's exactly what a goth baby a goth girl would love. Exactly.
But everybody, with that, I am sad to say that we are actually out of time. We know you liked what you heard because you stayed with us to the end. So go ahead and ring the bell, smash that like button for the algos. It really does help us out. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, wherever. You can do Twitter at Crowdsourced Poll, Facebook at Crowdsourced Tribune, or join the Facebook group at /group/Tribune Commons. Join the Discord. Discord's how we share things. We're going to have more contests in the Discord, prizes and stuff like that. Stay tuned for that because we are trying to build our community and have a good time. But Drummer, go ahead and shout yourself out, and then Universal Discord, you can shout yourself out.
Sure. Well, like I said, I go by Drummer. You can find me on YouTube, Drummer122. It's the same thing on Instagram, Twitter, and all that stuff. And yeah, check it out.
All right, Yudi?
Oh, I'm Universal Discourse on Twitch is Universal Discourse, also Twitter. And we do quantum physics, all things indigenous, debate training, music. We have a mutual aid program starting, and I'm going to be having new content I'll be producing called The Surreal World, which is 3 people in theater and streaming in a house trying to document the travesty that is our lives. So stay tuned for that. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Oh, that sounds like it'll be a great time.
It's real. It's real. That's what happened. Yeah, it's real. Yeah.
That's
a week.
I am looking forward to that. Crowdsourced Politics does Cypher State as well. We are gearing back up our actual podcast, which isn't streamed live to the audience. That is a produced show. Stay tuned for that. Our first episode will be on policing since COVID and George Floyd protests. So stay tuned for that. We're going to have a police officer, hopefully have a social worker, an anarchist, and a couple of other people on that show. So it should be pretty good. I will also be starting up Data Strain, spelled with an E at the end, talking about data and going over how to do basic data science things with interesting insights that I've gleaned. We're going to start that soon too, once I'm done with my little notebook. So yeah, stay tuned for that. And as always, everybody, keep your head up through the political storm.